All right, let's talk about the house painting affordability problem that we're having right now. And this is a real problem. And I want to talk to you about history of some of this stuff. I've been through a lot of times. I've been painting for, a long time. Since I started out in the automotive industry, so I went into houses in the 90s. Houses, buildings, custom stuff. I do all kinds of crazy stuff now. But what we ran into is a problem with of course, the paint's gone up. And in California, the labor's gone way up. And people go, well, you're just, making all this money, all you guys, you painters, making money. It's like, no, when you have all this inflation on everything and you have stuff like huge increases in minimum wage, which I keep on telling people, when they raised when 2015 came out, 16, 17, 18, 19, prices of everything went up every year, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and then they decided to raise it now to $20 for fast food workers. And people go, well, that doesn't affect the painters market. That has nothing to do with it. Your minimum wage is $16. It's like, who pays somebody $16 to paint? My painters are like $50 an hour. Okay, it's like, for a good painter, it's $50 or $60 an hour. Let me tell you a little bit of history on this stuff. Let's go back to the 90s. Okay, when I used to paint a house, I used to paint a 1,200 square foot condominium that it had one neighboring wall. So basically, it was a single story house, basically like these ones over here, like that house over there. Same type of eaves, same type of stucco as that. That's kind of a Spanish look, if you see up there. Spanish look, had eaves like that, had a composition roof. And I used to paint those by myself in one day. I would start in the morning and I would work in one day, and it was a cheaper neighborhood, very, very unaffordable, people that just didn't have a lot of money. And I used to paint them for $680. Paint was $180, and I would do the house. I'd wash it down the day before, after I finished painting another one, and I'd wash it down, and I would paint it the next day. And that included stucco patch, a little bit of stucco patch, there was a little bit of stucco patch. And I'd go through and do the eaves one color. The eaves were dark brown, and the stucco was Navajo white. And I'd paint the whole thing in one day. I'd start at about 9:30 in the morning. By the time I got from the paint store, I get to the job about 9:30, and at 3:30 in the afternoon, I was done, and then I'd go wash another one for the next day. So I was doing them one a day, and I was making, can anybody get the math on that? $500 a day. Back then, the average guy was making about $250 a day. I could paint a house, a normal house, most other houses, I could paint in 2 days or 3 days and charge them between under $1,000 and paint a whole house on the outside. Paint was like $250, so about $750 labor, and I'd make about $250 to $350 a day back then. Now today, we're talking $7,000 to $10,000 for that house. And people go, well, that's inflation. It's normal inflation. No, it's not normal inflation, you guys. We have never seen this kind of price increase ever. Let's see your comments below on this, guys. When you have, like the last 10 years before that, the same house charging $2,000, $2,500 to $3,000, and you're charging $7,000 to $10,000, we've never had that kind of price increase ever. And what it's done is it's created an affordability problem. I can't go to let's say I go to that same condo complex that was doing, and it was basically a house, again, one neighboring wall. I even painted all the fencing for that price. There was like little fences that went around everything. That was all included. And I did all that in one day. If I went and tried to do those today the same way, for me to make a decent amount, I'd have to charge like $2,000. And that would, and I could go to those people, the same people, and I could say, hey, and I probably wouldn't even want to do them for $2,000. because I'm old and I can't do them that fast. Back then I was younger, and they're probably in much more deferred maintenance condition than they were back then. They're probably just peeling and everything else because, you know, all this, people are not getting stuff done right now. And I've got to charge, you know, $3,000, $4,000 for those houses. You know, what? Who can afford that? These people were very, very limited income people. A lot of them were rentals. You know, the landlords didn't have a lot of money to pay for painters. That type of thing is happening. And I'm going to tell you, they would never go that cheap now. I bet you those same houses would be $5,000. I was the cheapest guy at $680. There was nobody that was touching my price. I could do them at $680. I was making $500 a day. Everybody else was taking 2 days to do the same job, and I was making a killing on those houses. So I bet today, I bet people would charge about $5,000 for those little bitty places. They weren't that big, 1,200 square feet with the fencing, and that would be a really, really cheap price. I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I'm just throwing numbers at you guys so you can think, oh, well, you guys are just making it all up. No, whatever. No, I don't know. I really don't know what I would charge to do them. I don't know what they go for, but I'm just trying to give you an example. Stuff has gone way up in price. Houses I used to charge $2,500 for, they're over $10,000 now, and it's just like, you know. And the thing is, I could go out and give them a price, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" And then they call me back a few days later, and they're like, "Oh, you know, can you do any better than that? You got a couple of prices, didn't you?" "Yeah." "Well, listen, no, I can't." And they just go, "Well, you know what?" And this was happening a few years back. This was happening about 10 years ago, back in right after 2008 or whatever. It was 2010, 11. People got to that point where it was just not affordable, and the prices were half of what they are now. So now you've got the poor cannot hire a painter. So pretty soon I'm going to have some videos coming out. They're going to show homeowners how to paint their own house because, you know, these prices are putting us out of work. You know, you can't go out and bid something when you know, this is the problem. And this is what I'm trying to explain. And so many people have said, well, just raise your price. Raise your price. Just raise your price. Okay. It's like this. Okay. All this stuff. So you've got houses, you know, let me give you an example. And this is what people go, oh, well, California, and a lot of this stuff is really happening mostly in California because we've got our own level of inflation going on here because of minimum wage. And it's just changing everything. So people go, oh, just raise your price. Okay. So let me just give you an example. There becomes something that's unaffordable. And I don't think people on the liberal side know how to do math. That's just the way it is. Okay. They just don't. They're not very good at math. They're good at other things, whatever, but they're not very good at math. I got guys saying, oh yeah, I'd just hire a guy, pay him $50 an hour to mix my paint. It's like, what? The paint mixing is like, what percentage of the job, guys? What percentage of the job is it to mix paint? I mean, it's like, what, 3%, 2% of your job? And you can afford to pay a guy $50 an hour? Where's that money going to come from? It's going to come out of your labor. It's just ridiculous. People have never done business in their lives are making comments on these videos. It just cracks me up. Let's see your comments on those things, guys. So let's talk about what affordability is. And a lot of people think, well, just go out and work the weekends and make more money to pay the painter. It's like, no, it's about affordability. The same thing that's going on in the housing market is California is putting together all these different things. Like to build a house in California, you have to have fire sprinklers. To build a house in California, you have to have extra insulation on the attic. To build a house in California, you have to have a reflective roof. To build a house in California, you have to have solar panels. To build a house in California, you have to have, I can go on. There's just tons and tons and tons of regulation now they've added over the last 10 to well, since Jerry Brown was in office. So a whole bunch of this Title 24 is part of that. There's a whole bunch of other laws. There's been extra earthquake codes, all this other stuff that's come into play for house building. And so what's happened is it's basically, if you do math, and most of you liberals don't do math, don't tell me you do because you really don't. The comments I'm getting from you guys are just cracking me up. So this is what happens. Let's say a house, today we have normal interest rates. People go, oh, these are really high rates. No, they're normal interest rates are around 7%. So if you have housing at 7%, and in order for somebody to qualify for that house, the average, let's say the average house payment for somebody who could afford it would be, let's say, $2,500 a month. It's probably more. That's probably more than most people can afford, but let's say $2,500 a month. Okay, and at $2,500 a month, you can only pay for a $400,000 home. But the average home to build it costs $500,000 to $600,000 because of all those extra building costs from the lumber tax, from all these other things. I could go on. I'm telling you, there are just so many. You go on. What happens is you become unaffordable. You cannot qualify for the loan. In other words, if you can only qualify for $2,500 a month based on your income, okay, and the house cost more than that amount at this interest rate would buy, let's say that's $400,000 or $300,000. I think it's less than that. I think a $2,500 house payment at 7% will only get you, I think it's around $280,000 or something like that, roughly. There's no houses for $280,000. The minimum house is like $450 or something like that where I live. Okay, and the person that could afford a $2,500 house payment can't buy anything, and they can't even build the house for that amount. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Is we've created a unaffordable housing crisis. We made a way for make housing so expensive because of laws that people cannot afford to buy them. And this is the same thing that's happening in the paint industry. They created laws, let's make those companies pay higher chemical fees. Yeah, those guys, we're going to make them pay. Who pays? The consumer ends up paying for it. Let's make them pay. Let's higher minimum wages. All right, good. We're going to help those poor people. Nope, doesn't help them, but they make them pay. They make you pay, Mr. Consumer. And now you can't afford to hire a painter. It's just ridiculous. The liberal has just taken over California. This crazy leftism has taken over our state and created an affordability problem. It's not just affordability, it's income qualifying for a house. You can't even qualify for the loan. You can't even save the money for the paint job because you don't even have enough money in your income budget to save money. It's just completely ridiculous, you guys. I don't know. Where's the end of this? How is this going to change? Tell me in the comments below. I'd really like to see, because I really don't see anything going to change in the housing market. I don't see anything that's going to change as far as that goes in the painting business. That's why I keep saying this. Painting business is a ship show. It's just ridiculous. You can't sustain this kind of pricing. People can't afford 100% increase in 10 years when we've only had in the 90s we had maybe a 10% increase in prices. In the 2000s we probably had a 20% increase in prices, and in the 2010s we've had 120% or something like that increase in prices. How can you sustain that? Look at what happened in the housing market when that happened. When all of a sudden the housing market just collapsed. That's what happened in 2007, 2008. How can you sustain that? Anyway, I'd like to see your comments on that. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and talk to you later.